Hi everybody, I'm John Walters, along with Coach Matt Campbell, and here's what we're going to have for you coming up over the next hour on this program. We'll visit with the coach, we'll talk about the season coming up. John Haycock, the defensive coordinator, will be here. We'll visit with 8 different Cyclone players, and Eric Heft from the Cyclone Radio Network will be here to help us wrap things up. But let's get it started with Coach. And Matt, you talked at length in your press conference, which we showed just a few minutes ago here on Cyclones.tv, about kind of player ownership, and that was something we saw really emerge last season, but you feel like it can maybe take another big step this year.
Well, I think, when just the foundation of that really started to get laid the last 2 years, I think now you start to see football teams go to football programs. And, I think one of the things that's nice now is not only maybe you had it at 1 or 2 spots, but now you're starting to see it where each position group, and, we've talked about this concept of 10 strong, the 10 position groups, across your football team, having their best players taking great ownership of what happens daily. And, I think we saw a lot of that this summer. We knew if we were going to have the ability to even continue to take another positive step forward in this football program, that's what it was going to take. And so you're always looking for ways for that to grow, and I thought our kids really handled that challenge well.
I know you talked a lot last year about the importance of what happened in January and February and March. Now that was going to dictate the kind of season you had. What did you see this year in those months?
Well, I thought a total unique challenge now. Now the challenge that, I think last year it was the chip on your shoulder that nobody thought you could be successful, where now the challenge was going into January, February, and March, you could allow ego to set in and think, well, you know what, maybe I did some good things last year, or maybe I did this. And I think the approach that I took, even as soon as our last regular season game ended, is, man, there was a lot of opportunities for us to do some really great things, and we missed out on those. Here's why. How do we now attack that? How do we understand that? And I think one of the things our kids did is they took that same belief system and said, you know what, there's a lot of areas of improvement that we need to make. How do we address that, and how do we continue to move ourselves all together forward? And I thought our January, February, March, April, May, June, July, and really now the beginning piece of August, you feel like you're a part of a football program now, where you see the kids have a great investment in what we do, not just weekly or every other day, but literally daily. When they step in to our facility, there's an expectation level in everything we do.
That happens, I would think, especially with maybe the older guys first, but are you starting to see it with some of the younger guys too?
Well, I think where you see it is now young guys in your program for a period of time, 6 months to a year. The older guys say, listen, this is how we do things, and you're either going to do it or you're not going to survive here. Yeah. And that's when it becomes special, and I think that's what you have seen. I think that's why I'm really excited for some of those redshirt freshmen and starting to see some of those redshirt sophomores that are starting to emerge in position battles, being able to emerge with some confidence and some general excitement, because they know the expectation which we expect them to live by.
Got some footage of the Liberty Bowl, and I want to ask you specifically about that. We've talked a lot about what that meant to your senior class and how great that was for those guys to end their careers that way. But how about for the guys coming back? What is that experience, those extra practices, that good taste in your mouth, what does that do for your guys coming back?
Well, I think the first thing is the extra practices. I mean, you'd be naive not to say, yes, the win's great, but the reality is getting those practices where you can start to really have a head start going into spring practice to say, where are we? Where are our deficiencies? What are some of these guys that maybe didn't play a heavy role last season but are ready to emerge onto the scene, and their winter practices allowed them to prepare for the bowl game, but also really allowed them to prepare and be that much closer to being ready in spring to show what they can do. And so I think it really sped up the process for us a lot of ways. And I thought that was really big. I thought it was powerful for our team, especially a team that you still look at the bulk of this football team. It's really young. The 70% of our guys are still, sophomores, redshirt freshmen, or true freshmen in our program, and I thought that was so huge to get those practices.
You talked a lot last season about doing the unspectacular things spectacularly well, and your program really did that a year ago. A lot of those things: turnover margin, not turning the ball over yourselves, not committing penalties, playing smart football, and you start looking at some of those little hidden yards, your program took big steps in those areas.
We did, and you know, I think as you look at it, and yeah, I said this a little bit in the press conference today, there's about 8 trends that dictate winning and losing. You know, I thought we handled probably 2 of those trends really well, but you still see those other 6 areas: running the football, stopping the run, you know, red zone percentage, all these things that are areas that we can really push the envelope of this football program forward. And, you know, our kids know that. I think that's why you do studies like that, because your coaches know it, and you have a chance to really honestly evaluate yourself. You know, sometimes if you look at the wins and the losses or the feel-good moments, you can get lost in the process and you lose yourself. If you really look at the reality of the situation and you can identify, you can really push yourself forward.
I want to ask you a little bit about the offense in just a moment, but right now I want to ask you about the defense, because John Haycock did such a great job with that group. I mean, you held 7 Big 12 opponents to 21 points or less. That doesn't happen very often. It gives you a chance to win every week.
Well, you know, any sport really still revolves around the ability to play great defense. And if you want to be a championship caliber football team or anything, you have to have the ability to defend. And, you know, Coach Haycock has done a great job. He's got a great history of putting that together. I thought one of the best things that I'd say about Coach Haycock last year is his evolution of, you know, taking his assistant coaches who are really talented on that side of the ball and coming together and doing something out of their comfort zone to give our team the opportunity to have success. And, you know, I think it took the skill sets of Tyson Vite, DK McDonald, and Eli Rashid. It took everybody pulling in the same direction in that staff room to really create a foundational change for that side of the ball and ultimately our football team. And so I'm really proud of that whole group. You know, it's fun to watch those guys work, and you know, we've been together for a long time, so it's fun to be able to interact and work with those guys on a day-in, day-out basis.
We're going to talk to Coach Haycock coming up on the show in a little bit, but since you're kind of stepping into that role of offensive coordinator, I want to talk specifically about the offense right now. And the rush offense, let's start with that. Room for growth, but obviously a great running back room and an improving offensive line. Those things might add to a much better ground game this year.
Well, I think that's the starting point, you know, from the offensive standpoint, is still having an identity. You know, I think we've been searching for that identity over the last 2 years, and you know, a little bit of it is trying to make sure you have all the pieces in the puzzle to be able to be successful. And you know, some of those areas, you know, that we need to continue to grow that offensive line. There's no shortcut to it. You're not just going to trade up and get yourself a better group right away. That it takes time and development and growth. Same thing at tight end. And you know, we're very fortunate now. You see guys that are redshirt sophomores and redshirt juniors that are starting to play reps and get those opportunities to grow and to play and to do. I think it's got a chance to really allow for a really solid foundation to move forward in some of those areas we haven't been where we needed to be.
Last thing for you, Coach, the passing game, especially with Kyle Kemp returning at quarterback and now getting reps with the #1 offense, which didn't happen until midway through last season. How big a factor is that for Kyle's development?
Yeah, and again, I think that's where you talk January, February, March, April, May, June, July, and August were so powerful, you know, because not only was Kyle able to sit back and watch himself playing meaningful reps from a year ago, but he was also able to say, and he's smart enough to say, well, where must I get better? Mm-hmm. Where must I push the envelope forward? And then how do I grab those players? Because passing game is all about feel, and it's about knowing where your guys are going to be and when they're going to be there. How do I hold those guys accountable to be with me on a day-in, day-out basis? That took a monumental change in our football program this offseason, and the credit goes to Kyle. You know, he's become like, you know, an 11th assistant coach in a lot of ways. He's in there when we're in there. He's out there with those guys, and when you have a guy like that, especially at that position, that becomes really powerful for your team.
I know you're excited to go talk to the rest of the media. We're going to let you do that right now, Pat. Thank you for taking the time.
Thanks for everything.
Really appreciate it.